Welcome to the Business End of Agility podcast, hosted by New Zealand's Business Agility Meetup community. We're here to bring you real-world stories from innovative organisations and forward-thinking leaders around the globe. We're going to explore all facets of business agility, from adaptive leadership and evolving company cultures to emerging ways of working, processes and technologies. I'm your host for the session, Bianca, and thank you for joining us. Today's leaders are under siege. The pace of change is rampant, technology is invalidating strategy almost as soon as it's written, and new challenges are rising for humans in the workforce. In today's conversation, we're joined by technologist, futurist Melissa Crawford to discuss how leaders can navigate this evolving landscape and where leaders should be focusing. Melissa is a leading expert in the future of work. She has a rare skill set crossing both people and technology, with 2 technology degrees alongside being the HRD hot list and awarded the Emerging Directors Award from the Institute of Directors. Melissa is also a member of the Association of Professional Futurists, a graduate of the Institute for the Future and Houston's University's Foresight programs, and is currently completing a Master of Science in Positive Psychology. With these skills, Melissa is the director of Tech with Heart, where she helps companies with their future strategies. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thanks for having me.
I guess the first question on everyone's mind is, how does HR and technology mix? How did you traverse from one world to the other, and where did you start?
Well, actually, I bounced a little bit. So I actually started in technology. So my first degree was in technology. And then I felt like technology projects weren't really factoring in the human side of things enough. So I decided to pivot and upskill on my people and organizational psychology. And so I spent a lot of time doing big people projects. And then I found that sometimes people didn't focus on the people stuff quite as much as I hoped they would. And also I could see another wave of technology about to massively disrupt. So I wanted to be a part of that again. So I went and did my second degree. And then I was like, right, now I want to play in the intersection of both of these magic fields. Hence Tech with Heart was born.
Do you find, obviously people might think that HR and technology is on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Do you see some synergies between those areas?
Yeah, I personally think that the future is about optimizing the best of both of those. So, and what I see is, sometimes I'm working with technology teams and, I've got a lot to share with them to help them think about the human side of things and the unintended consequences in the people. But likewise, when I work with people teams, they really are a little bit blind around what's coming technology wise and thinking about the human impacts of how that's going to hit. So I find like they're both similar in that actually they need each other. There's some really interesting strengths they could get from each other. And I think it's important that they develop those for, preparing for the future.
There's certainly a lot of kind of discussion around that, the world of technology and HR coming closer together as we start looking at a human and digital workforce. So it seems like perhaps you might be not the only one that should be focusing on this space.
Absolutely. In fact, I wrote an article, I think it was last year, about how IT and HR should become besties because
nice.
I really see that synergy coming. And then, I've seen some interesting new roles starting to form in the last year globally where they are starting to create that mix.
Yeah. Let's talk about leaders across the globe. I know you work with leaders sort of everywhere around the world. What's the kind of common challenges leaders are facing right now?
Yeah, and you're right, and throughout the different countries, actually, it's similar things. So I think, first of all, I'll premise it by saying I think that leadership is one of the hardest roles, particularly at the moment, because there's just so much expectation on a leader. And I think that the traditional leadership programs that our leaders have been put through don't necessarily prepare them for what's coming. And I think that in organizations, there's some really interesting dynamics with different expectations on leadership from the different generations. And, if I pick on a middle manager in the middle, where they're trying to manage up to a very different style than they're trying to, manage their team who have come from different demographics. So I think that's quite a big thing. I think there's lots of fear and uncertainty. Leaders are feeling that themselves, but they're also really feeling the pressure from their teams who are starting to feel nervous about things. And I think the pace of change. So, I really, for a long time, have disliked the term change management, because when was the last time we ever had a business as usual period? A comfortable la 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 business as usual period. Like,
Everything's predictable, everything's fine, we know what's
yeah, I
coming.
can't remember that era. So, yeah, I think that it's just constant, and I think it's accelerating. And I think a lot of leaders are feeling that and kind of, trying to keep up with the kind of shift in expectations.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough period. With all of that in mind, what should leaders be currently focusing on now?
Yeah, I would say two things. I would say that people first. So, number one, you are a leader. Your role as a leader is a very important one, and your people will be looking to you. So,
Mm,
I think people first. Some of the leaders kind of get a bit caught up in the technology shifts or the processes or productivity and all of these kind of things, but actually, people first if you're a leader. And then the second thing I would say is taking the time to look up and look out.
mm.
So that foresight piece, you can't really be prepared. You can't really help your people prepare if you don't really understand what's coming and how that might impact. So taking the time out of your business as usual to look up, look out, and start to think about how to prepare for that.
It might be the first time for leaders. Leaders can often be so much in the mode of firefighting and dealing with kind of operational issues that looking up and out might seem a little daunting if they haven't done it before. What would be some basic first steps that you think leaders could take to start putting that into their practice?
Yeah, I think you're right, because a lot of them will say things like, I'm too busy to do that. Like, I'm just dealing with what's happening. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, without doing that, it means you're always going to be stuck in that wheel. Whereas leaders that do start to look out more have better resilience and better agility to adapt to things. So it's got a lot of benefits to it. As far as the where to start part, obviously that's the sort of stuff I work with leaders and companies on. But it's around, depending on your industry, there are often a lot of different things you could attend where, people will be, bringing that information to you on how things are shifting and what to be thinking about. So making sure you get involved in some of those kind of networking opportunities, follow some people in your industry or people like me who spend their life researching this stuff and bring you the nuggets. So if you're time poor, that's a great way of kind of getting that information. There's lots of great podcasts that talk about these things now
Mm.
as well. But I guess make a start. Just make a start. Understand if your weakness is on the technology side, start to focus on that. If your weakness is understanding the people shifts, start to focus on that,
Yeah.
or your industry shifts.
Yeah, great. Obviously, people might be leaning towards AI to help them in this space. And obviously, organizations are kind of rushing towards that embracing of I guess, first and foremost, a two-part question. How do you think leaders should be using AI? And secondly, is there any unintended consequences in this race to embrace AI in organizations?
Oh yes, gosh, this we could talk about this for the whole hour. Um, so a couple of things. I would say that yeah, that there is definitely a race, and sometimes people are just doing it for the sake of saying that they're doing something to do with AI without really thinking it through. Um, and I've seen so many different approaches at different organizations on this. Um, I guess the thing with AI is it isn't a magic bullet. If you don't
Mm,
really know how you're going to maximize it, and your data is garbage to start with. It's going to surface a whole lot of problems. So there are lots of sort of foundational things that aren't right, but also the culture of your organization. So yeah, I mean, there are some companies that have done kind of no training, or they've just put a system in and said kind of go for it, or other ones that kind of have their head in the sand and they're sort of saying, no, we don't want you guys to play with it. And then a whole lot of shadow AI starts to happen in the organization. I think the unintended consequences is there's already starting to be some shifts in behaviors and capabilities. And I think that every company that I've kind of looked at lately tends to be focusing purely on the what can it do for productivity, what is it doing in the tasks kind of space, and aren't really thinking about some of these flow-on effects. So, for example, if people are starting to use AI, for example, to summarize things, and you're used to a culture where you put in these horrible 100-page reports, and currently nobody's reading the 100-page reports. They're using their AI tools to summarize it because they're all time poor. Then that's a shift in kind of behavior, and it's also a shift in capability of reading through to that kind of attention to detail part. It also starts to shift the behavior of the people writing those reports, because they're like, why am I going to bother doing it quite this way now if I know it's going to be chucked through an AI thing and summarized into 5 bullet points?
Yeah.
And so all of these sort of little subtle shifts and nuances that I don't really see companies thinking and talking about. Likewise, we don't say to people, "I'm sorry, we can't hire you because I think you use spell check for this for your application." I don't believe you did the maths in your head. I think you may have used calculator or Excel. These are kind of just common expectations now that we know that people will use these tools as an enabler. And so that same sort of transition is happening with AI, but it also means there's parts of what we used to do that we're not going to be doing as strongly anymore. What does that mean for your business? Is that important? How do we put in other elements like critical thinking? So for people to be able to question the things that they're seeing, to dig deeper and not just spit something out to get that task done because we're just so overwhelmed. So yeah, I think there's lots of kind of cultural things that they should be thinking about in their organization. A lot of companies say that they're innovative, but then the way that they've rolled out this AI project and the culture that they've formed as part of it clearly beg to differ. So I think it should be a lot of companies have made it an AI project, and I think that's a technology project, and that's a mistake. I think it has wider consequences that they should be thinking through.
So I guess that's sort of saying that people could be thinking it's just an AI tool rollout and then
Yeah,
treating it as
that's
any other tool
exactly.
rollout.
Yeah, that's
Right. Yeah.
exactly. And there's also definitely digital divides. There's the people who have figured it out, are utilizing it really smartly, others that are using it at a basic level, and some that are still terrified and confused and not really sure how to maximize it. And they kind of feel like, oh, what's happening around me? And I'm kind of not on this bus yet.
What do you feel is like the leader's role in this? Let's say that an organization's brought in the tools, they've done the classic tooling
Mm.
implementation, the leaders are left with that digital divide, that diversity of adoption. How should they be approaching this conversation with their team, incorporating it into building their own culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this can be a make or break in your organization. No matter how it's done from the top, the leader can really shift the dial here. So I commonly see two different types of leaders. I see the one, uh, most commonly, unfortunately, who is nervous about it themselves, doesn't really lean into it, and will make passing comments like, I suppose you used AI to create that. Or, she spat out another thing using AI. And so that sends a very strong message. I see this as
Mm,
cheating. I don't respect this. I don't see this as a, no one goes, I think you used Excel for this. That's not what we
There's an
do.
expectation almost. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. But on this kind of thing, some of those leaders are really sending the clear message. I don't I don't respect this as a tool, and I'm almost marking you down for using it. And then
Mm.
the very rare, fantastic leaders are going, "Hey team, here's what I used this week. Oh my gosh, I tried it in this way, and it saved me so much time. Let me show you how I used it." Um, oh, hey team, it spat this thing out to me today. It was so funny. If I didn't know to check the references of blah blah blah, I might have taken this at face value. So I was so glad that I had that kind of critical thinking to apply to what it gave me. But this portion was
Mm.
really good, and it saved me time in this and this. Um, what have you guys been using it for? And right, this week's AI of the week goes to Mary, who reckons she saved 2 hours this week by applying AI to this. So that is such a
Mm.
different message. That's curiosity. That's, we're making mistakes together. We're learning together. We're sharing together. That's the kind of leader I would like.
So a really strong theme around role modeling and
Yeah.
engaging the conversation around it and making it normal, but coaching almost in the same vein as well.
Yeah, and they don't have to be an expert in it. They're kind of learning together. Like, hey guys, let's all learn together. Where is it working? Where is it not quite working yet? How can we apply it in the future? And how can we stretch from, beyond just summarize this for me, write a draft of this for me, do a tone. What tone should I apply to the? Rather than those kind of basic getting started in
Mm.
AI, how can we lift this upper level?
We talked before around people being time poor. It's kind of like this constant race all the time. And there's this potential that with AI, then people might actually get some of that time back as they can do their tasks faster with higher quality or more productivity. What should leaders be thinking about in terms of that capacity? Like, if they have more time, what could they be doing in their teams or in their functions differently to really add value?
Yeah. So what I would love to happen in this space is for them to leverage that time on Team Human.
Mm.
So with this big focus on technology, uh, I wrote a post recently on LinkedIn how every report I see talks about the importance of people being digitally savvy and using tools like AI, etc. It also talks about the importance of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And I don't see people going, oh yeah, let's make sure we incorporate that as well. It doesn't seem quite as sexy as let's put AI into our strategy. So I would love to see them maximizing on that. And so, what does that look like for customer facing organizations? It's the opportunity to add more experiences, personalization, the humanness that we argue we don't have enough time for because we're stuck on the other stuff. Well, this could create it. Let's actually apply it to that. Um, when every company gets to the point of having the same technology, it's going to be this piece that's going to be the magic or be the differentiator. So how could you start developing that now? We know our leaders are going to need to be much more um, higher EQ, because traditionally a lot of them have
Mm.
got through on their kind of left brain knowledge, which AI is going to whip them on. So why don't we start spending that time on upskilling them on some of those elements now to help people cope with the transitions that are going to happen in the next 10 years. So that's where I'd love them to spend the time on, is looking for the opportunity for how do we balance out Team Human on this, or we're going to be
Yeah.
accelerating on a technology race that we're going to look back in 10 years and go, oh, what did we do?
We made a bit of a mess,
Yeah,
which would be hard to come back from.
yeah,
Yeah. There seems to be a real risk as people have a fondness for toolings and saving the old cognitive strain by using tooling to support them, that to your point about Team Human, that they reach out less to collaborate with others because they can get the subject matter knowledge from the tool, that they might not need to lean into a difficult conversation because the the tool will do it. I'll just do it over here and then I'll just send it for approval. And I don't really need to collaborate because that could be a bit trickier. So there's that
Yeah.
real risk to manage, isn't it, in terms of that soft skill space?
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point because in my master's stuff that I've been doing, the psychology stuff, uh, and connected to my kind of personal goals, when people say, what are you kind of looking at this year? And yep, there's a whole lot of tech things, there's a whole lot of kind of futurist things, but actually one of the things that I'm doubling down on is human connection.
Mm.
So I'm doubling down on building. I mean, I've always had a very strong relationship with my friends, and building those foundations. But even more so, like, how do I really double down on those, because that's going to become more and more important. And there's really interesting research about the impact that has on your brain when you actually
Oh,
have that
wow.
human connection element. So yeah, I would be encouraging more of that. And that again, that's a really great kind of disruptor for your brain from all this kind of cognitive stuff and all this technology stuff we're doing. What could we also be putting in place to allow more opportunities for connection and humanness, and build, because you actually need that to build your EQ. You can't just build it by
Mm.
doing an online program. You need to be applying that with real humans, funnily enough, in person. So how do we create more opportunities for that? Because also that's going to have great societal impacts for what we know is the kind of loneliness epidemic that we've
Yeah.
got at the moment.
Yeah. So coming back to those three areas that you mentioned
Mm,
for leaders, looking up and out, being able to focus on team human, that human connection side, the relationship building, and giving time and space for that. And thirdly, around that AI space, being able to embrace it themselves and get really good at using it, and then sharing that knowledge and helping their team to build those skills. Those three areas are obviously new areas for lots of leaders who might have got to there based on subject matter expertise and being in that role, and knowing, really how to do that space well. And we're into that more innovative age where if we have actually time and tooling to be able to do things fundamentally differently, what would that be? So a bit of a shift, I would say, for leaders.
hmm.
What's your advice to leaders in terms of how do they start embracing some of those things? What things would help them in that journey?
Yeah, because it is almost leadership 2.0. Like, this is a new era we're coming into. So almost be kind to yourself, that maybe the skills that
Mm,
got you to your current leadership position are not the skills that will get you forward, and be comfortable with that and realize it's not just you. Actually, a lot of leaders will be in that position. In fact, I would say the majority of leaders will be in that position. So
mm,
starting with that, have a growth mindset around, okay, these are, if I really want to continue as a leader and I want to be a great leader, then these are three key things that I need to work on. Most companies have development plans. That's a perfect opportunity to kind of almost put your hand up and say, these are three areas I want to build. And then depending on your own learning style, what's the comfortable way of you doing that? So the emotional intelligence side, for example, you might say, well, actually a number of our leaders are probably going to need to work on this. Let's get a base level. So, for example, I'm certified in an EQ tool, which is a great baseline around what does our EQ look like? Because if you say to someone, "Oh, your EQ is not that good," what do they do with that? How do they know what to build? What does that actually involve? So that can be interesting for people to actually understand what emotional intelligence actually is and the factors that they can work on. It is
mm.
something that they can work on. I used to think that you're kind of born with your emotional intelligence, or you weren't, but it's
Quota.
like anything.
That's it.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
really want to work on it, you can, but you have to be very active on it. Um, they might decide to get a coach or a mentor. They might decide,
Mm,
actually, this is someone that I really admire that's really strong in this area, from either of those three areas we talked about. That might be their learning style. Very rarely will it be I'm going to do a course on that, to be
mm,
fair. Even though that's what we like to think, that we'll just do that and do the tick box and we'll be done. But yeah, I would say it would be creating your own personal kind of development plan. Be open to the fact that you might have some gaps, and be
Yeah.
curious around how to develop that. And these things are going to help you beyond just your workplace as well.
Yeah. I can see that there'll be some positive effects flowing on from a community and family perspective as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, my mum was recently over from Australia and I was showing her how to use AI and what to apply it to. And we had a very interesting discussion about, previous decades that she has an interest in with it. And she was, yeah, I think I had to remind her at the end that it wasn't a person because she was quite taken by this conversation and how engaging, the AI was. Um, but yeah, so I guess my point with that is it's never too late to learn, and as long as you've got the kind of curiosity, uh, and if you've got kids, it's going to be a massive impact on them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every field. So there are some businesses that I'm working with, and they have a lot of operational staff, and they're like, oh, they don't really use computers a lot, so they're not going to. And I'm like, still include them because otherwise
Yeah.
you're going to create more of a digital divide, and actually they could use it in lots of different contexts.
Yeah, they can still use it in their home front as well, so
Mm.
it's not a work only tool, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of kind of future tooling, we've talked a bit about AI. Is there other things that you think in terms of future trends that leaders just need to be kind of thinking about or aware of?
Wow. Fresh of today, I just ordered my first humanoid robot.
Ah, was that I saw something about Neo as
Yeah.
a yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely while everybody's still caught up on AI, I would say my head is very heavily in humanoid robotics because I think that's going to be a major disruption and a big game changer to both the workplace and society. So it would be useful for leaders to be kind of thinking about that. There's other technologies beyond that which will be even more of a game changer, but I think some people are still trying to focus on AI at the moment. So I would say let's not scare them too much. Just focus on AI and getting involved in that because even robotics, AI is going to be incorporated into the
Inside
robotics, and
it.
so
Yeah.
it's just layering. So it's a really good place to kind of start.
Yeah, amazing. Um, let's talk about positive psychology. You mentioned it before, and it might not be a term that many people have heard a lot. What is positive psychology while we're on the topic, and what's kind of the implications in terms of things that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I guess where psychology often focused on people having difficulties or where things aren't quite functioning and how to kind of support that side of things, positive psychology is more focused on how to help people thrive and flourish. So
Mm,
optimizing the best. So it studies people who are thriving, flourishing, high levels of happiness, well-being, health. So all of the kind of positive levels, and starts to analyze what are they doing, how do they think, how does their brain work. So which is much more appealing to to me to study because I'm really interested in how do you bring out the best in people. So hence doing this
mm,
particular master's. I'd actually done a lot of work in this space. In fact, I ran a project for 2.5 years for Air New Zealand that focused on positive psychology across 12,000 employees there, which is probably my
wow.
favorite project of a lifetime. Um, and so I've had a lot of passion in it and worked in it for a long time. But yeah, I really just wanted to double down and do my master's. And my thesis around it is going to be around the intersection of future technologies and psychology. So that's why I'm leaning into that side. But yeah, it's about how to optimize the best. And I think that, again, with the kind of the loneliness stuff and the mental health issues and the fear and anxiety that people have around change,
Yeah.
the more tools I have in my belt for helping companies and individuals think about how to optimize the best of themselves, the better.
It sounds like it's kind of taking there's always been well-being programs in organizations, but clearly they're not quite cutting the mustard if we have a rising epidemic of burnout and mental well-being
Yes.
and loneliness in the workplace. So this might be one of those things if we focus more on this area that could make a significant impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the positive psychology stuff, I mean, you can put things in front of people, but they have to take it and apply and want to apply it, right? Um, but I think like there's already a number of schools and things like that who have started to weave positive psychology through into their programs. So even things like um, setting goals, spending time in nature, uh, thinking about the future and kind of picturing what you would be doing. So having that kind of forward thinking, even that is part of positive psychology, and kindness, and so some of the human things as well, and gratitude, and some of those have
Mm,
really powerful impacts on the brain.
yeah.
So yeah, a lot of these practices I've been doing for a long time. As you know, we've talked about Random Act of Kindness Day before, and it's around you know how do we think about applying these, particularly in the world that we're about to move into over the next decade?
It sounds like there's a lot of underlying theme here around connection, relationships,
Yeah.
having a sense of meaning and autonomy at work. Obviously, that's key as well.
Mm.
As we have all of these shifting components around AI and tooling and what that might mean in terms of how we organize and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to my phrase team human. Like, I I really see people focusing so much on the technology side, and you almost just need to lift yourself up a little bit and look at the bigger picture and go, well, actually, team human here. How are we helping shape a future that we will be proud of?
Yeah. Is there a correlation, do you think, then, of the more significant the technology change, there's a fast follower in terms of the amount of investment that we should be making from a team human perspective?
Yeah, I would like to see a balanced approach. I would like to see companies saying, okay, we know this technology is coming. We know that it's something that we're going to need to lean into, but we're also going to balance it with some factors that we know are going to be important on the human side through this transition. So yeah, I would love to see equal focus on that. And I guess that connects just perfectly with my brand, Tech with Heart. So I do believe
Mm,
it's both sides we need to optimize. And I do see a lot of companies, if we were looking at a scale, would be very off on
mm,
one side.
yeah. Given your background in technology, then, talking specifically to technology leaders, what do you think might be two or three things they should be thinking about going forward to bring that heart more to the play?
Yeah, so get somebody involved in the conversations. Just don't think of tech implementations as just tech projects, because it does have wider implications. And particularly on the psychology side of things, there's some very interesting shifts that technology will have. So my key tip that I talk about to technology people is that for every new technology that's implemented, there will be behavioral shifts, there will
Mm,
be capability shifts, and there will be expectation shifts. And I've never seen a technology project look at that in their project plans. And even if they got change management teams, often they talk about what training do we need, what communication do we need, but they don't factor in the psychology element. And very rarely do they involve people teams into the project. And even then, the people team gets stuck into the what's the training and how do we roll this out, rather than what's the psychology part of this, what's the neuroscience, what's the behavioral shifts, what's the impact to capabilities, what will this mean to the workforce, what will this mean to our ways of working and our culture, and like there's lots of things that come with it. I'd love technology teams to be starting to think about those. Like one company I've had some recent conversations with, they're looking at bringing some robotics into some of their workplaces, and we've had a great conversation where they're already talking to me about what are those human behavioral factors that we need to
yeah.
be considering as we do this. And so yeah, I'd love more technology companies to be thinking like that.
And coming back to your earlier point around tech and HR becoming besties,
Yeah.
for our leaders, our executives in those spaces, what do you think would be some really good agenda items that they should be coming together to be talking about?
Yeah, so if they for a start, for every technology project, realized that there would be those three shifts,
Yeah.
and at the first instance of that, of it coming up into a conversation, bringing some people in who have those skill sets to talk through things and make sure that that's thought about right from the beginning. That would be fantastic. Not an afterthought, not a, oh, we've had this in for a month now and oh, we've realized. Microsoft Copilot was a really good example. That was put in across multiple companies and it was just a tech project in pretty much every company.
Yeah.
Constantly, uh, like I mentioned, both sides have a lot to learn from each other. So, maybe like a reverse mentoring kind of factor where, the people team would love to be upskilled in some of the technology stuff. Likewise, the technology team could really value picking up on some of that kind of emotional intelligence or kind of people factor. So it's a win-win if they leaned into how do we actually support each other on this process.
And elements like that employee experience, I suppose, would also be really helpful in the technology space. And likewise, how do we optimize workflows and use the right technologies? A good two-way conversation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the examples I talk about a lot was a company that put in an AI tool and completely hadn't factored in the unintended consequences of the piece that it eliminated in the workflow, what impact that had to people's brains where they were previously doing that piece. So,
Yeah.
without going to depth into the story, um, basically, it removed a piece where the employees had some time to reflective learn and to do some quite menial things, but actually it was a very important break time for their brain. The
Ah,
AI removed that, and there was not one person in that conversation who had the ability to say, well, hang on, let me talk to you about how human brains work. This could be an unintended consequence of that. How will we deal with this shift?
so by actually taking out that menial task and thinking that that would alleviate a load, it actually increased their load because then they had no kind of like lower cognitive activities. It was always
Exactly.
maximum. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also, so the original business case was all about efficiency and productivity, and the customers would love it, and da, da. Actually, none of that was surfaced because
Mm.
the quality dropped because the employees were under more pressure because they weren't getting that time, and they're stressed and had a lot of turnover and sickness, and it had lots of really negative consequence. And it
Wow.
was very clear that nobody had thought about those three things that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I know that this is a big space for people to be thinking about. How could they find out more about you, follow your articles, and things like that?
Yeah, so I'm always posting things up on LinkedIn. So that's an easy way to find me, Melissa Crawford. And of course, my website, so www.techwithheart.co.nz. And that's got my other details on there too if they wanted to contact me personally.
Thank you so much for your time today. Some really good thought provokers for leaders in terms of the shifts and the things to be thinking about in this future is now world, I suppose we can call it.
Yes, they all have a part in shaping the future. So don't just wait for it to happen, figure out how you can help shape
And enjoy Neo when
it.
your house
Thank you.
robot
Yeah,
arrives. We look forward to hearing how that goes.
I'm taking name ideas now.
Excellent. I will have a think and submit some.
Okay.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.